This video is going to be a bit of a confessional. I have several confessions to make. If you're new here, hi, I'm Dara, and I created the Magenta Otter Travels channel to be a place where Brits and Anglophiles from around the world could hang out and talk about British stuff. Sometimes serious, sometimes fun, sometimes downright silly and stupid. So I will be continuing the series I started last week about random funny British things that I have noticed in my 20+ trips to the UK, as seen through my rather demented brain.
Okay, here's confession number 1. During my first trip to the UK in 1985, I was a typical obnoxious American tourist. I was a student who had spent the summer backpacking through Europe with my Eurail pass and my dorm mate from university. We spent the last 2 weeks of our trip in the UK. We did all the typical touristy things, posing for photos with yeoman warders and royal guards as we traveled through various parts of Britain, visiting castles and other major tourist sites, wearing our Hard Rock Cafe sweatshirts, of course. We even climbed up on the lion statue in Trafalgar Square for a photo, which of course is not permitted, as I later discovered. And this photo of me was from when I went to Harrods for the first time and tried on a 100% silk dress in the changing room. This provides photographic proof that I have been obsessed with the color magenta for many decades. The photo doesn't do it justice, but it was a fabulous shade of magenta. Then we met up in Oxford with some other friends from college and traveled around through England, Scotland, and Wales. This is a photo of us in the oven of a castle ruin, and I'll never forget in Scotland, we rented, aka hired, this crazy Citroën car, which was very unique and full of character. Speaking of characters, this photo, taken of the 4 of us using bales of hay as a tripod, is one of my all-time favorite travel photos. So here's confession number 2. I can be a bit of a goofball. When I travel, I see things from an often silly perspective. And to me, there are so many little things along the way each day that I find really funny. I'm not sure if everyone will think all these things are funny, but I'm going to share some of them here on my channel. Back in that first trip to Europe in 1985, I found these things funny that were just goofy versions of the humor, like this innocent sign from Germany. I'm waiting for my polyglot friend Pats or my Bavarian friend Ava to tell us in the comments what this sign really means. Or this soft drink from France with a funny name you shouldn't say on American TV. And I thought this store name was funny. I think it was in France, but honestly I'm not sure. Pretty ridiculous. Finally, back in Britain, I convinced my friend to pose in this ridiculous fashion next to a respectable sign for a brass rubbing center. Given all that nonsense, you will understand that when I visit England and I see signs for property available for rent that says "to let," you know I'm imagining the letter I being inserted in between those 2 words. You see, in the US, we don't have those signs since our signs always say "for rent." Speaking of signs, I'm frequently amused or at least intrigued by signs I see around Britain. I recall the first sign I found amusing in England because it was a simple thing, but just so different from the States. The fact that in train stations, the exit signs say "way out" instead of "exit." To this day, every time I see one of these signs, there's a little voice in my head that sounds like a stoned surfer saying, "Way out, man." And then there's the train station sign that many an American tourist has been so enamored with that they've been motivated to buy a t-shirt like this to take back home. The infamous "Mind the Gap" sign. The sign is simply a warning to people to stay away from the gap near the edge of the train. If you are British and wondering why we think this is so funny and what our signs say here in the US, this is the US version. I filmed it in Connecticut a couple weeks after I filmed the "Mind the Gap" sign from Paddington. In the US, we say "watch" instead of "mind," which is why my favorite minding sign is this one. Mind your head. Not only does the saying make me smile, but I also particularly love the addition of this graphic of a person accidentally bashing their skull against a hard edge. Looks painful. I found this industrial mind your head sign for sale at glendinning.co.uk. It takes the headbanging to a new level by describing Bob, who was safe in his hard hat, and Barney, who did not mind his head and suffered a bloody head injury for which he was very sorry indeed. But this sign from Lower Slaughter goes in yet another direction. The sign at the public toilets directs us to mind our heads in the doorways and then gives directions to the lavatories, reminding us that, of course, women are always right. While we're on the subject of public toilets, I remember clearly decades ago visiting an English town somewhere when my British relative asked a local where the conveniences were. I had no idea what she was talking about. Sure enough, that is another euphemism for toilet. And here is a sign from my last trip to England to prove it. Now, there's a debate over whether British people are more polite than the rest of us. I don't know what my opinion is on this topic, but I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I do find British signs more polite. This sign from the rubbish bin area near our flat in Cheltenham makes sure you know it is a polite sign. But obviously, someone in Britain is not being polite, or the bus wouldn't need a huge sign warning passengers not to assault or verbally abuse the staff. And it's not just the coach drivers getting abuse. This sign I saw at Heathrow warned against abuse and violence and asked passengers to be courteous. In other transportation signage, this is from a taxi. We are asked to please not slam the door, please no food, no drink, no smoke. But my favorite part was the interestingly worded warning, if you soil this vehicle, a charge. I feel bad for whatever some passenger did in this chap's taxi that caused him to post such a sign. Here's another sign from a laundrette, aka laundromat, in the Lake District that had a funny American spin on it that made me text it to my friend back home. She is a personal trainer, and since we don't call athletic shoes trainers, we call them sneakers, this sign made it look like you were politely being asked not to put fitness instructors in the washing machines. When it comes to dining in a restaurant, in the US, we are expected to leave a gratuity or tip. In the UK, this is less common. But an American reading this sign in Britain would think that someone was pretty cranky about leaving a tip, to the point of filming you on closed-circuit TV and prosecuting you, when actually the sign is instructing drivers to not litter or leave trash at the loading dock. When I was in London in January, I was quite ill with a nasty cold, so I had to visit an urgent care clinic at the local hospital. I just kept staring at this sign in the waiting room, which I found to be rather odd. I usually only hear the word casualty in reference to people dying on the battlefield, so it just seemed a bit grim as I sat there slumped in my seat feeling like death warmed over. And this sign on the side of a manor house we visited also was amusing to me. I'm sure it meant you needed to proceed through the narrow entrance and honk your horn a bit, but that is just not a sign you would ever see in the US. And honestly, I don't even know what this sign means. I need a British viewer to kindly explain this one to me in the comments. Maybe there are signs like this one somewhere in the US. Please let me know if you've seen sheep crossing signs, but I've never seen one. I believe I took this photo in Dartmoor National Park, where there were sheep grazing and wandering about the moors. I love sheep crossing signs. But then I saw this sign in the Lake District, and I was intrigued. I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan for 2 years, a place where I swear there are more squirrels than people. And I never saw a squirrel crossing sign. But then it got a whole lot funnier. There was this sign nearby. And I'm not completely daft. I know the sign is warning us to drive slowly so as not to run over one of the endangered red squirrels that live in the area. But it also just really seemed like the sign is scolding the red squirrels to drive slowly. and I was imagining these lead-footed speed-demon squirrels racing around, and it just made me giggle. On a side note, if you would like to leave a comment poking fun at the way I pronounce squirrel, have at it. Okay, a few more signs which would not be funny to a normal person, but I found funny. I saw this in Nottingham, famous home of Robin Hood, who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. So when I saw an ATM offering to give away cash for free, I thought it was very appropriate. However, I was perplexed by the reference to naked lights in the adjacent red sign. No idea what that's talking about, so feel free to inform me in the comments. And now to the other side of the island. Let's talk about Wales. This is a photo from my first trip to Wales in 1985. This sign is not funny, but I had never seen Welsh before, and honestly, I didn't even realize there was another language spoken in Wales. I just saw this sign, which in my head said that I shouldn't demo gwibble at any time. I apologize to any Welsh people that I just offended with my butchering of their beautiful language. For those viewers who've not seen Welsh signs before, some of them can be a mouthful. On a recent trip, we encountered this pack of signs along the road, and I thought, who has time to read all this? I mean, look at the length of some of these words. It just looks overwhelming because on top of the long Welsh words, the signs are all in 2 languages. But there you are. They kindly apologize for any inconvenience in the second sign, which I thought was very polite. And just when you thought the potty humor was over, here's a classic set of signs I encountered in England. I should hope that if this lane offers a view of anyone's butt, that it is a private road.
Next week's video includes a very special surprise, so do not miss it. Be sure your bell is clicked. And if you're curious how I got to be such a crazy Anglophile, check out my Britain Love Stories series, which tells all the reasons I love the UK. Thanks so much for watching, and do something good in the world today.